Hello, you beautiful people of the internet, and welcome back to another episode of Movies Good, Internet Bad, a celebration of the cinema uploaded right here to the place that hates it the most. I'm Cory. That's Shane. I did the head tilt correctly this time. And in this video, we're talking about the second half of season 2 of HBO's House of the Dragon. There will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen those episodes, please click away and come back and see us. Shane, how are you, sir?
I'm good. I should be asking you though. The tropical storm bunker and everything down there.
Yeah, there's still some wind, some wind shear coming through. We have the tail of the hurricane right now is just kind of like making its way over central Florida. So every like 30 minutes or so, you hear something fall over outside because there's like a big gust of wind. But thankfully, no damage, no leaking, none of that crap. So
Yeah, I heard there was a tornado at Disney World, or like
yes,
a warning, tornado warning.
yeah, they were like
Hopefully,
rushing people
hopefully they
inside
had,
or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully Glenn Powell was there to tell them all to go inside.
Yeah, and if you have Genie Plus, you get priority access to the shelter, and if you don't, you have to stay outside in the tornado. That's how it works. Little theme park insider baseball for everybody there. Hey, if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please go ahead and do so if you can. We would like to have more people along for the ride. Like this video also, even though you don't know what we're talking about, it's a really great way to explore everything we're doing here. So Shane, let's set the stage here. We did a mid-season review, and that ended with the battle at Rook's Rest, which resulted in filleted Aegon, a dead Rhaenys, a dead dragon, a couple dead dragons. And then in the second half of the season, some more spooky time with Daemon happened. Rhaenyra Avengers assembled a team of dragon riders, some with noble blood, some without. And then we had a very long finale that kind of felt like a trailer for the next season. So I'm very curious to see what your thoughts are on this. It seems like there's a lot of controversy on the internet today. And we try to fight that to the best of our ability on this channel. So let's hear it, man. What's working for you? What's not working for you with the second half and just the season overall now that it's over?
Yeah, unfortunately, like I think you almost have to judge it. You have to judge the finale on what it is versus what it should be, kind of thing. As a finale, like if you look at every other Game of Thrones finale, and even House of the Dragon, right? Most of the time, not a ton happens. Like it's very much a setup for the next season. But the problem is that the reason for that is that usually there is a big thing that happens just before the finale, and you need time to cool down and then push your way into the next season. But that big thing never happened.
Yeah.
And so like the structure of this season was the big thing happened in episode 4, which is what we covered the last time we talked about this show.
Yep.
And then it kind of spun its wheels leading up to this big event that never occurs. And so it felt really like I would love to be behind the scenes on how they pitched this season specifically, because I think most seasons at least have to have, I think you said it yesterday when we were texting, like a beginning, middle, and end. You need the season to stand on its own in addition to propelling like a further narrative. And I don't feel like this did that very well.
Yeah. I saw some tweets. One said the season 1 finale of House of the Dragon says the war is happening. And then the season 2 finale of House of the Dragon says the war is happening.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, where did we really go? Obviously, there were things that happened this season. It would be silly to say that there was nothing.
Yeah.
There have been some dumb tweets out there saying that this is worse than season 8 of Game of Thrones, which is simply not true in any way, shape, or form. You had some character deaths. Rhaenys is gone, her dragon. Aegon is basically dead. There was some baby murder in the early part of the season, which, God, that feels like an eternity ago.
Yeah.
However, we spent a very large chunk, especially in the second half of this season, with a lot of our main characters spread apart. And I think that contributed to the feeling of slowness. Having Daemon stuck on Harrenhal pretty much by himself. You know, he's
Man,
there with a bunch of bit players, right?
that
The
was a
whole time.
struggle.
Yeah. And it's just like, okay, what weird vision quest is he going to go on this week, right?
Yeah.
And the one he had in the finale was actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
I thought it was
That one
pretty
was
neat.
fine.
But it took a very long time to get there, and then you're waiting and waiting and waiting for the payoff of, well, what's going to happen when him and Rhaenyra come face to face again? And then he basically is just like, yeah, I saw this vision. I suck. It's my bad. You're my queen. We're good. So it's like everything that happened during the course of this season almost kind of didn't need to happen for Daemon, because he's back where he was at the beginning of it.
I was gonna say the same thing. It was very circular that he goes on this quest to end up exactly where he was to start the season.
Yeah.
And I don't know how fulfilling that quest was. If it was something super interesting and we're engaging the whole way, and there was like a huge meaningful plot development behind it, then I could see it. But it's like he goes there, has spooky time, and then gets an army, and then we're fine. And it just felt like a waste because he's such a dynamic and interesting character to watch. Like the first season, he was probably the best part of the show, and then you just sideline him to do nothing for an entire second season. And we talked about in the mid-season that it almost felt like that Hopper storyline in one of the Stranger Things seasons. But then in the end of that season, it's a very big moment for Hopper, and
there's a payoff.
There was no real payoff. At least, I mean, there was, I guess, him declaring for Rhaenyra again, but it did feel weird though that they set up the betrayal in the same episode that they then resolved it 10 minutes later. Like, if you were gonna set up this thing about maybe he's gonna betray Rhaenyra, set that up in like episode 2. Kind of, work his way through that, and then at the end it's a big pivot that he doesn't do it. But you set it up and then you resolve it right next to each other. That doesn't work very well. And there was a lot of stuff like that. Like there was a lot of one location season. Like if we got to see that damn boat one more time, they stood in the same place for an entire season. It was like the same volume set, and they didn't have enough budget to make more CGI volume sets, so it's just Lord Corlys standing in the same location every episode.
He's on that dock, just hanging out.
I know. And I guess
looking at the fruits of his loins that he won't admit are the fruits of his loins.
And I guess the point is that eventually there's going to be this sea battle between like the Lannister army that he goes and recruits and the Corlys army ship, because he's the master of ship, something like that. I don't know. I'm not great on the lore, but it just felt like a huge setup for a season 3. Like, did that really contribute anything to the season?
I don't necessarily think it did. I mean, there was some good character stuff in there. Like,
the character stuff works.
Corlys having his edges rounded off after Rhaenys dies. And, that kind of stuff was good. Obviously, the two different arcs with his two bastards. One ends up being a dragon rider. The other wants nothing to do with him and doesn't want his help with anything. That's cool. I dig that. But also at the same time, it's just like, we could have done that in one episode and a half. The other stuff like the Lannister guy going to Essos. You introduced that in the last episode of the season.
Like I know
it was a fun little arc, right? And like the mud wrestling and having to earn his keep and all that was like, it's cool, but that feels like an episode 4 or 5 type thing, not a finale.
I agree too. It was like Whiplash. It's like, oh yeah, he's still a guy in this. Like, we hadn't seen him for a bit, and then he's off doing his thing. And it felt, I just don't know how it was planned, because like, if you're really whiteboarding this out, it almost feels like they chopped the season in half and said, extend that to one season, and then season 3 is a different thing. It almost has the exact opposite problem that season 8 of Game of Thrones does, where season 8 everything happens so fast that nothing was developed. Here it feels like stuff is just developing so slowly, and like we get to a decent spot, but like it took so long.
It's funny you say that, because season 1 of this show one of the big criticisms that people had for it was that it moved too fast. It was like time jump, time jump, time jump. We're accelerating. Where's it going? It almost feels like they pulled the brakes too hard and overcompensated for it in this season. And I'm a big proponent of character work and character arcs. I don't have an issue with that. But when it gets to a point where there really is no payoff, it within the context of that season, like there will probably be payoffs for a lot of what happened further down the road, season 3, season 4, whatever. But I think it's important that, like you mentioned before, every season has like a milestone or a checkpoint that we get to where it feels like there's some sort of finality there, even though we know it's not the end of the story.
Yeah. And we didn't really get any of that. I mean, it feels like a setup season. Like it's all set up without as much resolution. And I don't know, because I have not read the books. You haven't either, right? So
no.
I don't know if there was stuff they could have inserted in here or rearranged to make this work a little bit better. But the big, finale battle that they're marching towards here felt like it should have been in this season. And I don't know if it's like a longer arc of a battle, like maybe it needed more time to breathe, but then you need to cut stuff earlier so that maybe the first half of the season could have been what this season did, and then you get to the battle and stuff at the end of the season.
So I have one big thought as to why that didn't happen. And the reason that I think that this is all part of it is because this is one of the very few shows that filmed during the writers and actors strikes last year.
Yeah.
And if you have logistical issues where like maybe they said, because season 1 was 10 episodes and this season was only 8, right? Yep. I'm thinking maybe the writers and the showrunners said, you know what, let's hold off on doing the big battle because we can't do it justice right now because of the working conditions that we're in. Here in the UK, because they do that all in the UK. That's how they were able to do it without breaking any of the SAG-AFTRA rules during the strikes or whatever. But they couldn't bring in any help from anyone stateside because of that, right? So maybe if it was stunt coordinators or action people or different directors or whatever, not to make excuses because, a finished product is really what you need to judge based off of. Yeah. But if there is a reason why this happened, that seems to me like the main reason it may, and they may have said, you know what, because in theory, this big battle would have been episode 9, which would have lined up with the Red Wedding or the Battle of the Bastards or, all those big penultimate episodes of Game of Thrones seasons. Maybe they said, let's just hold off on that, make it an 8-episode season, and then storm out of the gate beginning of season 3 with this big battle when we have all of our people back.
Yeah, that's actually a decent point. Maybe they did literally just chop the script after episode 8 and said, now this is the finale. I don't think it makes it better, obviously. But
of course. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good point. And I noticed in this season specifically, and maybe this existed more in season 1 and I'm just misremembering because I haven't watched it in a while, but it felt a little small, and like I noticed the cracks in the walls a little bit. Like I noticed more of the volume sets that were very obvious. I noticed more of the, like we talked about the Lord Corliss, like just standing in the same place. It almost feels like they needed to stretch it out and they just didn't have enough material. And so maybe that was the issue, right? Is maybe they did write this as half of the season and then realized they couldn't do the full season, and so they just stretched it out. And it's literally the exact opposite thing that happened in season 8 of Game of Thrones, where it was supposed to be 2 or 3 more seasons, and they're like, we'll just smash it into one, and then it's giving everybody whiplash. So it's tough because you want to blame somebody, right? And sometimes it's not the creatives that were the problem. Sometimes it's just unforeseen circumstances. And, in this era of internet outrage, I think everyone wants to just slam everybody and hate everything. But I do wonder if, not to give them excuses, but, it could have been what you were saying.
At the end of the day, though, internet outrage, like, I very much enjoyed watching this season of television.
It was still entertaining.
Like, the actors are very good, and the limited sets that they have, they light them exquisitely, and they're shot very well. Like, there's not a lot, from a technical standpoint to dislike about a show like this, and there's proof if you look out there, the other like big dogs in the genre space, your Marvels, your DCs, your Star Wars, whatever. Not a lot of their shows have the cinematic quality that something like this has, right? So we might be judging it hard, but it's almost kind of like saying, hey, Peyton Manning had a bad game. We're going to give him shit for it because he's Peyton Manning, right? He's a great quarterback, right?
Yeah.
That might not be the best analogy, but that's kind of
no,
it's
right.
Where my brain
it might be a little bit
right?
dated though.
Yeah, we have okay, fine. Who then? Tua Tagovailoa,
I don't know.
Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, whatever. Check my sports credentials. But we hold Game of Thrones to a high standard because of what has come before, right? And we do the same thing with Star Wars, and then they make a show like Obi-Wan that looks like a horse's ass for 2/3 of the season.
Yeah,
this is not that. So the outrage is partially warranted, I think, but not fully warranted.
I do think that in general this season, while I am a heavy proponent on character work, dialogue, all of that, it just felt like the plot was standing so still that it became boring because a lot of these conversations were not really leading to much. Like, we had moments of character work, I guess, but if you weren't seeing that reflected in the plot, then it almost didn't matter. Right. My wife almost fully checked out by the end of the season, which I think is a good barometer of how most people would view it, right?
Right.
It's just not enough is happening in this season for it really to warrant a full season. And that's unfortunate, right? Because this is a big property for HBO.
Huge.
It is, Game of Thrones until the end was one of the best shows maybe ever created before it came tumbling down. And I think there was enough promise in season 1 of House of the Dragon that people thought that maybe this would be a little bit different, especially because they were adapting books. But seems like they haven't quite gotten the formula back to where it was in those first 5-6 seasons of Game of Thrones, where they were just cooking. Just the pacing was perfect. Everything was working phenomenally. It still feels like there's some rough edges here.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. But they've already been greenlit for season 3.
Oh yeah,
which
there's no risk.
The music video montage at the end of this week's episode was a clear indicator.
By the way,
man,
just kept going.
There's a lot of pieces on that chessboard.
It's like the Return of the King ending. It's like, are we done yet? Oh no, we're not done yet. Next one. Oh, not done yet.
So I bow to you. Anyway, I
love that ending though. But anyways,
it's interesting because the real dilemma here is that this was only 8 episodes, which is becoming a point of contention with some people online that are saying that seasons aren't long enough. But I think the real peril here is that you do this huge setup and you tease this big battle that's coming. We're not going to see that for another 2 years, at least.
Yeah.
Right. But this is not like, you're a big Lost fan, right? Mm-hmm. Lost had 22 episode seasons and they came out every year.
There was actually a big break between, I think it was 4 and 5 or 3 and 4. One of those. The we have to go back thing. There was actually
did they sit on that for a while?
There was a very long wait between that and the next season.
But like on average,
maybe writer strike related actually.
But on average, 1 year and 6 months,
like that. Yeah, I think so.
And they were producing 3 times the amount of television.
Mm-hmm.
So it begs the question: what has changed in today's day and age? And I'm not saying Game of Thrones should be 22 episodes.
No, yeah.
What I'm saying is that they should be able to pump out one season a year fairly
Yeah,
easily.
I think a couple things. One, I think, is production costs have gone way up. And, back in the day, you could do a show like Lost. And I know the pilot for that at the time was the most expensive episode of television ever filmed or something like that. But uh, TV was much more about limited sets and, using that effectively, right? Which is funny because this kind of has limited sets too. But I think like as we got into like this streaming war, everyone wanted to make every show like movie quality.
Yeah.
And in doing so, you have a certain amount of budget and you allocate it out to a certain amount of episodes so that you can allocate a ton of budget to each episode to make it look very cinematic and have big epic moments and everything like that. But like if you watch older TV shows, there's a lot of episodes where not a lot happens at all, where it's just like a small little story. And that's fine. And that's an hour of television. There's like a famous Lost episode where they're fixing a bus, like a Volkswagen bus. And that's the entire episode is they're trying to get this bus to work again. And then they fix it. But it's like a nice little character moment between a few of the characters. That would never happen today. You don't get episodes like that anymore. Everything has to be, which is weird that we talk about this season not having enough plot, but only being 8 episodes. I think like traditionally you have these 20 episode seasons, and some of the episodes, not a lot happens. They're more character moments, but overall you have a lot of things that progress the story. And I don't know. I really think it is, everyone saw HBO doing the 10 episode model thing, and everyone was like, we just need to do that. And make it super cinematic quality,
super successful, right?
Yeah, but like I don't know if it works for everything. Especially when you're bringing over essentially movie scripts and then extending them to 8 episodes of television.
That's a whole different conversation.
We've talked about it with Star Wars forever, right? Where there's just not enough plot to sustain the number of episodes they're doing, but people want more episodes. It's just they're writing it a completely different way. This is, it feels like it wasn't written for television, just like a movie extended.
Yep. I think those would be better served as like a 4 episode miniseries almost. And not aiming for 8 episodes of TV, but they're different mediums. I think that's the big talking point here is if you're going to write something to have it be a movie, have it be a movie.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out that way and you want to make something for TV, start from scratch and reconfigure it so that way it can be long form.
Yeah, and I guess what's weird though is when I look at even people like Damon Lindelof, right, who he wrote Lost, he did the 20 episode seasons, then he comes in and does The Leftovers, and each of those seasons was, I think it was 10-8-8, something 10-8-7, something like that. And then he does Watchmen, and that's, I think, 10, right? Something like that.
Yeah, 9 or 10, one or the other.
And so even a TV writer is doing that, but he's doing it very effectively, and I don't feel like those seasons are shortchanged at all.
No.
But yeah, it's weird. It almost feels like today, if you want to do something that's not a major franchise, which I know that Game of Thrones is, but like you have to do it on TV. And so you're just TV allows you some more risk taking and creativity. And so maybe that's where we're getting that like, hey, I have this idea for a movie. Well, it can't get made as a movie because of the business. So now we're going to make it on TV. Well, I don't have enough ideas to make it on TV. So we have to spin our wheels for this many episodes and then get, an unsatisfying season of television. I don't know if that's what's happening, but it kind of would make sense. Like most of your mid-tier dramas are not getting made as movies anymore. Something like Normal People, for example, which I thought was excellent, right? But it was like a 6 or 7 episode miniseries on Hulu. And I think like 15 years ago, that would have just been a movie.
Yeah, I think if you look at half the Apple TV Plus shows, they would work that way too. Like
Yeah.
Presumed Innocent was a movie.
Yeah.
they they
Yeah.
they essentially remade it into a TV series with some tweaks to the story. The one that Colin Farrell was in, Sugar, which is like
Hmm.
a detective
Mystery.
noir,
Yeah.
very easily could have been a movie 10 years ago. But in today's day and age, it feels like everything that goes into a cinema is high risk.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's a franchise, which we've seen, movies like the Marvels or Aquaman or the Flash, they all flopped, right?
Yeah.
Like nothing is a sure thing in the theatrical world anymore. So putting something on television where you can do smoke and mirrors and hide the numbers and flub things to make it seem successful, even if it's not, seems like an avenue that a lot of this stuff heads in.
Yeah, it's almost like having that built-in subscriber base allows you to do a little bit more risky things.
Right. Yeah.
At the expense of we are not getting any low-budget movies from studios anymore,
right.
in theaters. And I wonder if this will change, right? The streaming wars have kind of subsided a little bit. People are focusing more on cost savings and not trying to get, because everyone was trying to be Netflix at one point, and it turns out that you can't sustain 18 Netflixes, right?
Nope.
And so I wonder how this is going to evolve over the next 10 years. There was actually Vince Vaughn was on Hot Ones recently. I'm not sure if you saw this, but
yeah, I did.
He gave a quote somewhere around like when I was making movies, growing up in Hollywood, the IP was I'm a 16-year-old girl at school, right? Like that was the IP. John Hughes was making like being a teenager sucks movies, right? And that was the IP. And now it's like no, like teenage sucks, that has to be Spider-Man. Teenage, like you have to put some sort of brand on it for it to get made. And so anything like that, any sort of like coming of age dramas that you used to be able to get are now just like TV shows or limited series or something like that. So I do wonder if it'll shift. I wonder if, the more, it always goes in cycles, right? We've had past cycles of movies where it was these grand budgets and then they all flopped and they brought in, indie directors to do cheaper movies. And then we got stuff like The Graduate and Bonnie and Clyde and all that stuff. So maybe we'll get a new Hollywood movement. I don't
know. It's hard to say because at the same time, a movie like Deadpool is like close to cracking $1 billion after a week and a half of release. It's like it's really hard to say, man.
It's not very optimistic.
Yeah, populist cinema, I think, is the term. That's what's in vogue right now. And,
that's going to be really interesting too. If we get that movement.
If that does take over, and smaller, more interesting stuff continues to land on television, then I will just watch more television.
Yeah.
I mean, I watch a lot of TV already. I think I have a list. I've watched over 20 seasons of television already this year.
And you still haven't finished The Leftovers. But...
we'll get there. Don't worry about
that. Man, we are a long way from Game of Thrones or whatever, House of the Dragon in this review.
But hey, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, they're kind of that. They're the intersection between big budget cinema and TV with character driven arcs or whatever. And I think part of the peril of those types of shows will always be, do we satisfy the spectacle or have we satisfied on the character side of things? And it's a delicate tightrope to walk. And I think this season of House of the Dragon walked a little bit too much on the character side of things.
Yeah.
And maybe not even so much not fulfilling on the action, but just not fulfilling on the payoffs of everything. That's the real moral of the story here. So
it felt like more of a pacing issue than it did a story issue to me, where you had a lot of the big moments in the first half, and then the second half just kind of was whatever. Because the
story's good on paper, right?
Yeah, we were both really positive on this show when we did the mid-season review, and then between that mid-season review and now, I I feel like not much happened at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's all little things that
Yeah.
happened, right? And I think that even if they would have given resolution on just one of the arcs,
Mm-hmm.
that I think we'd be having a very different conversation right now. But they didn't resolve any of them,
Yeah.
and I think that's why a lot of people are feeling a little bit hollow or empty at the end of this season. But 2026 is only 104 weeks away, so
Yay.
and there's another Game of Thrones show coming out next
Yes, there
year.
is. Yeah.
That was advertised before last night's episode. So they're doing what The Boys is doing over on Amazon, where you get like 1 year of the main show, then 1 year of the spinoff,
Yeah.
then 1 year of the main show, because we're all way too thirsty, and they need to satiate all of us. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's kind of all I've got.
Yeah. I don't have much more to say on it. We'll be here for season 3 whenever it rolls along.
I mean, if we're still alive by the time it comes out,
true. World War III could happen. You just never know.
It's just old age, man. By the time the new one comes out, I will be almost 40, which is like, that's like colonoscopy time, man. That's some scary
Mike
shit.
Gundy, you're a man, you're 40.
All right. Well, I guess that'll wrap things up for this one. We'd love to hear from everyone who has watched this video. What were your thoughts overall on season 2 of House of the Dragon? What were your thoughts on the second half? Thoughts on the finale? Do you think it should be 8 episodes? Do you think it should be 10? Do you think we should go back to 16 episode seasons of TV? Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are. Shane is like a vulture. He responds almost immediately to every comment that comes through. Please like this video if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and tap that little notifications bell so you never miss another one. We will be back shortly with a video on our top 5 MCU movies. We are going to cover the events of the D23 Expo this weekend in California, if there's anything interesting that comes out of it, and then Alien Romulus the week after that. So lots of stuff coming down the pike. And until next time, we'll see y'all in the next video.